Story number 1. The Empty Desk. Chicago, Illinois. I still remember the first day I stepped into the towering glass building of Grayson and Hartley, a prestigious firm nestled in the heart of Chicago's bustling Loop District. Fresh out of college with a degree in marketing, I was eager to make my mark in the corporate world. The sleek office, with its open floor plan and floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city, promised endless opportunities and a chance to prove myself. My assigned desk was in a corner of the open office floor, positioned directly across from a large window. The space was modern and minimalist, with a white desk, a comfortable chair, and a high-end computer setup. It was everything I had hoped for, a perfect blend of functionality and aesthetics. However, as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice something peculiar about the desk opposite mine. Every morning, as I settled into my workspace and organized my tasks, I would glance across the room at the empty desk. It was spotless, devoid of any personal items or clutter, yet on the employee roster, a name was listed next to it, Brian Matthews. According to the company directory, Brian was a senior marketing analyst who had supposedly joined the firm just a few months prior. Yet, despite his name being on the roster, no one seemed to know him. I asked around, hoping to learn more about my mysterious counterpart. At first, my colleagues shrugged it off as an oversight or perhaps a new hire still acclimating to the company culture. But as days turned into weeks, it became clear that something was amiss. Whenever I mentioned Brian or the empty desk, the conversations would quickly change topics, with everyone subtly avoiding the subject. It was as if Brian didn't exist. Curiosity gnawed at me. I decided to dig deeper, scouring the company's internal communications and meeting minutes for any mention of Brian Matthews. To my frustration, there was nothing, no emails, no meeting notes, no project assignments. It was as if he was a ghost in the system, a figment of a digital phantom. One evening, the office was unusually quiet. Most of my colleagues had left, and the building's automated systems had dimmed the lights to conserve energy. I was working late on a campaign proposal when I glanced up from my screen and froze. There, at the empty desk opposite mine, sat a man typing furiously on his computer. His presence was inexplicable, there was no one else in the office, and Brian Matthews was not on any current project list. My heart pounded as I watched him work, the rhythmic clicking of the keyboard echoing in the silent room. I approached cautiously, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I drew closer, the man looked up, meeting my gaze. For a moment, everything seemed normal. But then, something horrifying happened. His face began to distort, the features melting away into a deep, black void. His eyes turned pitch black, absorbing all light and warmth, and his mouth twisted into a grotesque, silent scream. I stumbled back, my mind racing to comprehend the impossible sight before me. The empty desk was no longer empty. The presence of this spectral figure sent chills down my spine, and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. I turned to flee, but the door slammed shut with a force that rattled the windows, trapping me inside. Desperately, I reached for my phone, only to find it dead, no battery, no signal. Panic set in as I realized I was completely isolated, with no way to call for help. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows lengthening as if the darkness itself was closing in on me. The figure at the desk began to move, his actions deliberate and menacing. "Why are you here?" I demanded, my voice trembling. But there was no response, only the oppressive silence and the figure's void-like gaze. I backed away, tripping over a loose cable and crashing to the floor. My head throbbed as I struggled to regain my bearings, the sight of the void where Brian Matthews' face should have been seared itself into my memory. I tried to crawl towards the door, but an invisible force held me in place, pinning me to the cold, hard floor. Suddenly, the room shifted, the walls closing in around me. The air grew thick, making it difficult to breathe, and the oppressive weight of the darkness pressed down on me. Images flashed before my eyes, memories that were never mine. I saw glimpses of a man trapped in an endless loop of work, his life consumed by the very job that had promised so much. The vision was a stark warning, a reminder of the dangers of losing oneself in the pursuit of success. I realized then that Brian Matthews was more than just an employee, he was a manifestation of the office's dark side, a ghostly reminder of those who had been consumed by their careers, their identities erased by the very systems meant to elevate them. His presence was a chilling testament to the sacrifices made in the name of progress, the human cost of relentless ambition. Summoning every ounce of willpower, I forced myself to confront the apparition. "You don't belong here," I said firmly. "Leave me alone." The figure seemed to hesitate, the void in his face flickering with a hint of sorrow. "Bound by ambition," he whispered, his voice echoing through the room. "Trapped by desire." As he spoke, the room began to lighten, the oppressive darkness lifting as the first rays of dawn filtered through the window. The figure at the desk started to fade, his form dissolving into the air like mist in the morning sun. I felt the invisible force release its grip, allowing me to rise from the floor. Breathing heavily, I looked around the office. The desk opposite mine was once again empty, the morning light casting a warm glow over the space. My phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a new message notification. Hesitantly, I picked it up, my hands trembling as I read the message. "Don't lose yourself in the pursuit of success." The realization hit me hard. Brian Matthews was a warning, a spectral embodiment of the office's hidden dangers. I vowed to never let ambition consume me, to maintain my sense of self amidst the pressures of the corporate world. In the days that followed, the office returned to normal, the presence of Brian Matthews seemingly erased from both the physical space and the company records. But the memory of that night lingered, a haunting reminder of the thin line between ambition and obsession, and the ghosts that linger when we lose ourselves to the pursuit of success. I continued my work at Grayson and Hartley with renewed purpose, balancing my dedication with mindfulness, ensuring that I remained true to myself despite the demands of the job. The empty desk no longer haunted me, but it served as a constant reminder of the shadows that lurk within the bright lights of corporate ambition. Sometimes, late at night, when the office is quiet and the city's lights shimmer in the distance, I catch a fleeting glimpse of a dark void in the reflection of my computer screen. It's a brief, unsettling reminder that some ghosts never truly leave, and some lessons are etched into our souls forever. Story number 2. The Locked Meeting Room. Seattle, Washington. I've always believed that the heart of a company lies not in its cutting-edge technology or its ambitious projects, but in the stories that echo through its walls. Working at Innovatech Solutions in downtown Seattle was a dream come true for me, a place where creativity thrived and innovation was the norm. Yet, amidst the modern offices and bustling corridors, there was one place that remained shrouded in mystery, the old conference room on the third floor, Room 302. Room 302 had been locked for as long as anyone could remember. Legend had it that the previous occupants had met a tragic end during a late-night meeting, but no one could confirm the details. Over the years, whispers of strange occurrences and eerie sightings circulated among the employees, but the room remained inaccessible, its door secured with a heavy steel lock and an electronic keypad that no one knew the code to. One crisp autumn afternoon, the office was buzzing with the usual activity. I was seated at my desk, engrossed in developing a new software module, when my colleague, Megan, approached me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Hey, Alex," she said, leaning closer. "Have you ever wondered what's in room 302? I glanced up, intrigued. "All the time. It's like the office ghost story or something. Nobody ever goes near it." Megan grinned. "Exactly. And you know what they say about curiosity?" I chuckled, shaking my head. "Yeah, but I prefer to let sleeping dogs lie." She nudged me playfully. "Come on, don't be such a killjoy. Let's see if we can figure out a way to get in. It could be fun." I hesitated, the idea of both thrilling and unsettling. "Are you serious? What if it's haunted or something?" Megan waved off my concerns. "Haunted or not, it's just a locked room. We can probably find the code or something. Besides, it's just for a quick look. No harm done." Her enthusiasm was contagious, and despite my reservations, I found myself nodding in agreement. The following evening, after everyone had left the office, Megan and I decided to take the plunge. Armed with a few tools and a sense of adventure, we made our way to room 302. The corridor leading to the third floor was dimly lit, the fluorescent lights flickering intermittently. The air was cooler here, the silence punctuated only by the distant hum of the city outside. As we approached the door of room 302, a chill ran down my spine. The heavy steel door stood imposingly before us, the keypad a stark contrast to the sleek modernity of the rest of the office. Megan pulled out a small lock-picking kit, a twinkle of excitement in her eyes. "I've been practicing. Let's see if we can crack this." I watched as she deftly worked the tools, her fingers moving with practiced ease. Minutes felt like hours, the tension thick between us. Finally, with a satisfying click, the lock gave way, and the door swung open with a creak that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet corridor. We stepped inside, the room bathed in the soft glow of a single overhead light. The space was just as I had imagined, an old-fashioned conference room with a long mahogany table, high-backed chairs, and shelves lined with dusty binders and forgotten files. But what caught my attention was the set of coffee cups arranged meticulously on the table, their surfaces still warm to the touch. Megan raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "Look at that. It's like they left in a hurry." I approached the table, picking up one of the cups. The aroma of coffee lingered, a stark contrast to the musty air. My heart pounded as I reached out to take a sip, but something held me back. Before I could react, the room seemed to shift around us. From the walls, blurry faces began to materialize, their features indistinct and ghostly. They floated serenely, yet their presence was unsettling. The air grew colder, and a collective whisper filled the room, echoing off the walls. "Why are you disturbing us?" I froze, the question hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Megan glanced around, her bravado fading as she met my wide-eyed gaze. "Did you hear that?" Before I could respond, the temperature plummeted further, my breath visible in the frigid air. The faces on the walls seemed to draw closer, their eyes empty voids that stared straight into my soul. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling the room with an oppressive atmosphere. "We never left. We're still here." I felt a surge of panic, the room closing in around me. Megan grabbed my arm, her grip tight and urgent. "We need to get out of here, now." But as we turned to flee, the door slammed shut with a force that sent us both stumbling. The once warm coffee cups now lay shattered on the table, their contents spilled across the floor in dark, sticky pools. The whispers turned into anguished cries, the faces on the walls contorting in pain and sorrow. Desperate, I pounded on the door, trying to break free from the invisible force that held us captive. "Let us out. What do you want from us?" The room seemed to respond, the lights flickering violently as the spirits intensified their presence. The whispers morphed into screams, the faces on the walls now clearly visible, each one a hollow, lifeless visage of former employees who had vanished without a trace. Megan and I backed away from the table, our eyes darting around for any sign of escape. The spirits moved towards us, their cold hands reaching out, fingers grazing our shoulders with icy touches. The air was thick with despair, the weight of unfinished business pressing down on us. In a last-ditch effort, Megan grabbed my hand, pulling me towards the window. "We have to jump. It's the only way." I hesitated, the idea of falling into the abyss below terrifying me. But the spirits were closing in, their whispers turning into desperate pleas. With no other choice, we forced ourselves to leap through the window, the cold air hitting us like a wall as we tumbled onto the hard pavement outside. Breathing heavily, we scrambled to our feet, the sounds of the haunted room fading behind us. The corridor was once again quiet, the oppressive atmosphere lifted as if the room had never been disturbed. We stood there for a moment, hearts racing, before sprinting back down the stairs and out of the building. As we reached the safety of the street, the night air felt like a bomb, washing away the lingering fear. We didn't speak, the shared experience creating an unspoken bond between us. All we could do was put as much distance between ourselves and room 302 as possible. The following day, the office buzzed with the usual activity, but the story of our late-night adventure spread like wildfire. Some laughed it off as an elaborate prank, while others shook their heads in disbelief. But I knew what I had seen, the haunted spirits and their desperate pleas for peace. Determined to understand what had happened, I delved into the history of room 302. I discovered that over 2 decades ago, several employees had vanished without a trace during late-night meetings. Theories ranged from corporate espionage to psychological breakdowns, but the truth remained elusive. No bodies were ever found, and the room was promptly locked down, deemed too dangerous for use. I realized then that the spirits we had encountered were the restless souls of those who had disappeared, their unfinished business keeping them tethered to the physical world. Their presence in room 302 was a manifestation of their lingering fears and unresolved conflicts, a tragic reminder of the cost of ambition and the thin line between success and obsession. Determined to help the lost souls find peace, Megan and I decided to return to room 302, armed with knowledge and a plan to honor their memory. We sought the help of a local historian and a paranormal investigator, Rebecca Collins, who specialized in restless spirits and haunted locations. On a moonlit night, the three of us approached the building, the same heavy steel door that had once imprisoned us now welcoming us with an air of anticipation. We entered room 302 once more, the atmosphere thick with the energy of the past. Rebecca began the seance, her voice calm and focused as she called out to the spirits. "We acknowledge your presence. We are here to honor your memories and help you find peace." The room responded immediately, the temperature dropping as the spirits materialized around us. Their faces were a mix of sorrow and hope, their eyes pleading for release. Rebecca guided us through a series of rituals, encouraging us to respect their space and acknowledge their stories. As the ritual progressed, the oppressive energy began to lift, replaced by a sense of tranquility. The spirits no longer felt trapped, their presence now gentle and accepting. One by one, they began to fade, their forms dissolving into the night air with expressions of gratitude and relief. Eleanor's face stood out among them, her sorrowful eyes now filled with peace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of years of anguish. "You've given us the closure we longed for." With a final surge of energy, the room was left in serene stillness, the haunting whispers replaced by the soft sounds of the night. The spirits had found peace, their restless souls finally free from the confines of room 302. As we left the building, the weight of the experience settled over us, but so did a profound sense of accomplishment. We had bridged the gap between the living and the dead, helping the lost souls find the peace they had been denied for so long. In the months that followed, room 302 remained locked, its haunting presence a distant memory. But the story of that night lingered, a testament to the power of empathy and the importance of remembering those who had been forgotten. Innovatech solutions continue to thrive, but now with a deeper understanding of the unseen forces that shape our world. I often found myself reflecting on the lessons learned from room 302, the importance of acknowledging the past, the cost of unchecked ambition, and the enduring power of compassion. The empty meeting room had once been a place of fear and mystery, but through our efforts, it had become a symbol of healing and closure. As I walked through the office each day, the memories of that night served as a reminder to cherish the stories that lie hidden in the shadows and to honor the voices that seek to be heard. The locked meeting room was no longer just a ghost story, it was a lesson in humanity, a chilling yet poignant reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the spirits that linger in the forgotten corners of time. And so, as the seasons changed and the city of Seattle continued its relentless pace, the story of room 302 remained etched in the hearts of those who had experienced its haunting embrace, a tale of lost souls, forgotten memories, and the unwavering pursuit of peace. Story number 3. The Eternal Nurse. Boston, Massachusetts. I've always been a night owl. There's something about the stillness of the hospital at night that resonates with me, a quiet intensity that's absent during the bustling daylight hours. Working the night shift at St. Michael's Hospital in Boston has its perks, fewer interruptions, a peaceful environment, and the chance to connect with patients on a more personal level. But it also comes with its own set of eerie experiences, the kind that make you question what's real and what's just a figment of your exhausted imagination. My name is Linda Thompson, and I've been a registered nurse at St. Michael's for nearly 5 years. Over that time, I've grown accustomed to the rhythms of the night shift, the hushed footsteps in the corridors, the distant beeping of monitors, and the occasional cry for help from a restless patient. But nothing prepared me for the unsettling presence of Sarah Mitchell. Sarah was my colleague, a nurse who seemed to defy the natural limits of fatigue and rest. She always arrived before my shift even started, greeting everyone with a bright smile and a seemingly endless supply of energy. She'd stay long after the sun had risen, often working through breaks and skipping meals to ensure every patient was cared for meticulously. Her dedication was admirable, but it was her unwavering presence that began to unsettle me. One particularly cold October night, after a grueling 12-hour shift, I decided to ask around. Exhausted and curious, I approached the nurse's station during a rare lull in activity. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I leaned on the counter, searching for someone who could shed light on Sarah's relentless work ethic. "Hey, does anyone know more about Sarah Mitchell?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The receptionist looked up, her expression shifting from professional to perplexed. "Sarah? She's been with us for about 10 years. She's one of our best nurses." I frowned, sensing something was off. "But I thought she left a few years ago." The receptionist shook her head slowly. "No, that's not right. Maybe you're thinking of someone else." Confusion settled in. "I've never heard of anyone leaving. She's always here, working tirelessly." Another nurse overheard our conversation and joined in, her face pale. "Linda, you know we've never seen Sarah miss a shift. She's always here, but she's not supposed to be working anymore." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" The nurse took a deep breath, her eyes darting around the room as if afraid of being overheard. "Sarah Mitchell died 10 years ago. She was one of our top nurses, but the stress and long hours took a toll on her health. She collapsed during a shift and never recovered." I stared at her, disbelief etched into every line of her face. "But she's right here. I work with her every night." The nurse's expression hardened. "No, Linda. There's been no Sarah Mitchell here in over a decade. You must be mistaking her for someone else." I felt a chill run down my spine, the pieces of the puzzle refusing to fit together. Determined to get to the bottom of this mystery, I decided to investigate further. I dug into the hospital's records, searching for any mention of Sarah Mitchell. To my horror, there was no trace of her, no employment records, no incident reports, nothing. It was as if she had never existed. The following night, the weight of the unresolved mystery pressed heavily on my mind. I arrived early, my thoughts consumed by the inexplicable presence of Sarah. As the clock ticked past midnight, the hospital settled into its familiar silence. I made my way to my usual workspace, the dimly lit corridors stretching endlessly before me. That night, as I attended to my duties, I noticed a familiar figure at the end of the hallway, Sarah. She stood silently by a patient's bed, her face serene yet strangely hollow. My breath caught in my throat as I approached, the distance between us shrinking with each step. "Sarah?" I called out tentatively, my voice echoing in the empty corridor. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned to face me, her eyes meeting mine. There was a moment of stillness, the air thick with unspoken questions. Then, her face began to distort, the features melting away into a deep, dark void. Her once bright eyes now black holes, devoid of life and emotion. I recoiled in horror, backing away as her figure flickered like a malfunctioning projection. "What's happening?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness, the lights extinguishing themselves with a snap. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the blackness. When the light hit her, Sarah was gone, vanished without a trace. All that remained was the lingering chill and the echo of her silent scream. Determined to understand the paranormal events unfolding before me, I reached out to Rebecca Harris, a colleague with a keen interest in the supernatural. Rebecca had always been the skeptic, but even she couldn't deny the strange occurrences that plagued our night shifts. "Rebecca, you need to see this," I said urgently as she entered my workspace. "Something's wrong with Sarah." She glanced at me, concern etched into her features. "What do you mean?" "Sarah Mitchell hasn't been here in 10 years. I explained everything, the empty records, the eerie sightings, and the horrifying transformation of Sarah's face. Rebecca listened intently, her skepticism wavering as I recounted the night's events. "I've heard stories about room 302, she began thoughtfully. "They say it's cursed, haunted by the spirits of nurses who overworked themselves to the point of exhaustion. Maybe Sarah is one of them." Room 302. The old conference room that had been locked down years ago after a tragic fire claimed the lives of several staff members. The fire had started during a late-night meeting, fueled by a faulty electrical system. When the smoke cleared, the room was empty, no one had survived. Since then, strange things had been reported: lights flickering, unexplained noises, and apparitions of the lost nurses. Do you think Sarah's spirit is trapped in room 302? I asked, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. Rebecca nodded. It's possible. If she was overworking herself, her spirit might be restless, unable to move on due to the intense stress and exhaustion. Determined to help, Rebecca and I decided to confront the haunted history of room 302. Armed with knowledge and a sense of purpose, we sought permission from the hospital administration to investigate the old conference room. After several meetings and assurances of safety, we were granted access one stormy night, the perfect setting for a paranormal investigation. As we approached room 302, the wind howled outside, and the building seemed to groan under the weight of the storm. The door, heavy and imposing, stood slightly ajar, the darkness within beckoning us to enter. Rebecca took a deep breath, her flashlight cutting through the gloom as we stepped inside. The room was cold, the air heavy with the scent of smoke and decay. The remnants of the fire were evident: the scorched wood, melted chairs, and charred wallpaper. We set up our equipment, the EMF detectors and infrared cameras capturing every flicker of movement and spike in energy. We need to honor their memories, Rebecca whispered, her voice steady despite the eerie atmosphere. We're here to help you find peace. As we began the seance, the temperature in the room plummeted, our breaths visible in the frigid air. Rebecca led the ritual, calling out to the spirits trapped within. Spirits of room 302, we acknowledge your presence. We're here to help you find peace and move on from this place. The room responded immediately, the lights flickering and the air growing thick with energy. The spirits began to materialize, their forms ghostly and translucent, their faces etched with pain and exhaustion. Among them stood Sarah Mitchell, her presence both familiar and terrifying. "Why are you here?" I demanded, my voice echoing off the walls. Sarah's spirit floated towards us, her expression sorrowful. "We never left. We're still here, bound by our exhaustion and the unfinished business of that tragic night." Rebecca stepped forward, her voice gentle yet firm. "We're here to help you find peace. Let us assist you in moving on." The spirits hovered around us, their ethereal forms flickering with a desperate hope. The room seemed to shimmer with their collective energy, the boundary between the living and the dead blurring into nothingness. "Please," Sarah whispered, her voice a haunting melody. "We can't move on until we're remembered, until our stories are told." I felt a surge of empathy, understanding the depth of their suffering. "We'll make sure your stories are heard. You don't have to remain trapped here." Rebecca nodded, continuing the ritual. "We honor your memories and recognize the sacrifices you made. Your dedication and hard work were admirable, but they shouldn't have cost you your lives." The room began to lighten, the oppressive darkness lifting as the spirits felt our compassion and understanding. Sarah's form became clearer, her eyes reflecting a sense of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now filled with peace. "We can finally move on." With a final burst of energy, the spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving into the ether like mist in the morning sun. The temperature in the room rose, the air clearing as if a heavy burden had been lifted. "We did it," Rebecca said softly, her eyes reflecting the profound impact of the experience. "They're at peace now." As we left room 302, the storm outside had subsided, leaving behind a serene calm. The old conference room, once a place of tragedy and restless spirits, now stood silent and peaceful, its dark history finally laid to rest. The following days brought a noticeable change to the hospital. The lingering sense of dread that had once permeated the night shifts was gone, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and camaraderie. Patients seemed more at ease, and the night staff worked with a newfound energy, unburdened by the unseen presence that had once haunted our nights. Sarah Mitchell never appeared again, her spirit finally free from the confines of room 302. But her memory lingered, a poignant reminder of the importance of balance and self-care in a demanding profession. Her unwavering dedication had been both her strength and her downfall, a lesson etched into the very fabric of St. Michael's Hospital. Rebecca and I often reflected on that stormy night, the power of empathy, and the thin veil that separates our world from the supernatural. We had faced the unknown together, offering compassion to restless spirits and bringing closure to their tragic stories. It was an experience that deepened our bond and reaffirmed our commitment to caring for both the living and the departed. Years later, I still work the night shifts at St. Michael's, the memories of room 302 a haunting yet comforting presence in the back of my mind. The hospital continues to thrive, its corridors filled with laughter, tears, and the echoes of countless lives intertwined within its walls. And though the supernatural is something I once dismissed, I now carry a profound respect for the unseen forces that shape our existence, waiting for someone to listen and help them find their way. The eternal nurse had found her peace, and with it, the hospital had reclaimed its place as a sanctuary for healing and hope. But in the quiet moments, when the night is still and the wind whispers through the windows, I sometimes catch a glimpse of a spectral figure in the corner of my eye, a silent guardian watching over us, ensuring that no one else would suffer the same fate as Sarah Mitchell. In the end, it wasn't just about delivering care to the living, but also about honoring the memories of those who had given everything for their profession. And as long as I continue to walk those haunted corridors, I'll carry the lessons of room 302 with me, a testament to the enduring power of compassion and the eternal bonds that connect us all. Story number 4. The Basement Janitor. Los Angeles, California. I've always believed that the mundane aspects of life hold the most profound secrets. Working in a towering office building in downtown Los Angeles, I'd grown accustomed to the repetitive rhythm of corporate life, the endless meetings, the constant hum of fluorescent lights, and the ever-present scent of coffee and paper. My name is Lisa Morgan, and I work as a mid-level marketing coordinator at Helix Technologies, a firm known for its cutting-edge innovations and equally cutting-edge employee perks. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city lights began to twinkle, a peculiar ritual unfolded within the building. Without fail, around 7:30, an elderly janitor named Mr. Harris would descend the long, narrow staircase to the basement. His presence was a fixture of the building's after-hours routine, a silent guardian maintaining the pristine condition of spaces most of us rarely saw. Mr. Harris was a quiet man, always immaculately dressed in his uniform, his hair neatly combed, and his movements deliberate yet swift. He'd often be seen sweeping the floors, wiping down surfaces, and occasionally pausing to stare blankly at the closed doors lining the basement corridor. There was something almost spectral about him, an air of timelessness that made him seem out of place in the modern high-rise. Curiosity about Mr. Harris had been simmering beneath my professional facade for months. He wasn't listed in any of the company directories, nor was he mentioned in any internal communications. When I finally mustered the courage to ask our office manager, Karen, about him, her reaction was unsettling. "Oh, Mr. Harris? He's been with us for years, keeps the building running smoothly after hours," Karen said with a dismissive wave. "You know how it is, he prefers to keep to himself." But Karen's eyes betrayed a hint of unease, a fleeting shadow that disappeared as quickly as it had come. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The building's basement had always been off-limits to employees, strictly reserved for maintenance staff and authorized personnel only. No one I knew worked there, and yet, every night without fail, Mr. Harris was there, diligently performing his duties. One particularly chilly November evening, as I wrapped up my work and prepared to leave, I noticed the familiar descent of Mr. Harris down the staircase. My curiosity now bordering on obsession, I decided to follow him. I grabbed my coat and slipped out of the office, blending into the shadows as I made my way to the basement entrance. The stairwell was dimly lit, the flickering overhead lights casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. The air grew colder as I descended, the sound of my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. At the bottom of the stairs, the basement unfolded into a labyrinth of rooms and corridors, each one seemingly untouched by time. The hum of machinery and the distant sounds of cleaning echoed through the space, a constant reminder of the building's ceaseless maintenance. I followed Mr. Harris through the maze-like corridors, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. The basement was vast, stretching farther than I had ever imagined. As we walked, I noticed rooms filled with old filing cabinets, forgotten conference rooms, and storage areas stacked high with boxes of unused equipment. Yet, no matter how far I went, I could never quite catch up to Mr. Harris. Eventually, we reached a door at the end of a long hallway, its wooden surface worn and faded from years of use. Mr. Harris paused, placing his broom against the door before opening it slowly. I peered inside, my eyes adjusting to the dim light that filtered through the dusty windows. The room was empty, save for a single long table covered with various cleaning supplies and maintenance tools. Mr. Harris began to work methodically, his movements fluid and precise. I stepped inside, the door creaking softly behind me. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the faint ticking of an old clock hanging on the wall. I watched as Mr. Harris polished the table, his attention unwavering. There was an unsettling stillness to the room, a sense of being watched that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Mr. Harris," I called out softly, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. "Can I ask you something?" He paused, not looking up from his task. "What is it, Lisa?" I hesitated, unsure of how to broach the subject. "I've been meaning to ask. How long have you been working here? I don't see your name in any of the records." Mr. Harris finally glanced up, his eyes meeting mine with a depth that seemed to pierce through my very soul. There was a hollow emptiness in his gaze, a void that defied explanation. His face remained calm, but his eyes told a different story, one of endless sorrow and unspoken pain. "I've been here for a long time, Lisa." "A very long time," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Confusion swirled within me. "But you're not listed as an employee. How is that possible?" He shrugged, the gesture almost lifeless. "People come and go, but some things remain constant." Before I could ask another question, a sudden noise shattered the silence, a loud thud coming from behind one of the storage rooms. Mr. Harris didn't flinch. Instead, he continued his work, as if nothing had happened. I felt a chill run down my spine, the unease intensifying with each passing moment. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice shaking. Mr. Harris paused again, his eyes never leaving mine. "Yes. It's probably just the building settling." But his words did nothing to quell the growing sense of dread within me. I decided to investigate, turning towards the direction of the noise. As I approached the storage room, the door swung open with a force that made my heart leap into my throat. Inside, the room was filled with old, dusty furniture and boxes labeled with faded handwriting. But what caught my attention was the sight of a small figure huddled in the corner, a child, no older than 8, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Hey there," I said gently, kneeling down to the child's level. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The child shook her head, her lips moving silently as if trying to communicate. I reached out to comfort her, but as I did, she vanished into thin air, leaving me alone in the darkened room. My breath hitched, the reality of the situation sinking in. This place was more than just a basement, it was a repository of forgotten souls, trapped within the confines of this lifeless space. I turned back to Mr. Harris, hoping for some kind of explanation. "What was that? Who was that child?" He continued to work, his expression unchanged. "They're memories, Lisa. Fragments of the past that linger here." I frowned, my mind struggling to comprehend his cryptic response. "Memories? What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the room began to distort around me. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing thick with a palpable sense of sorrow. The faces of forgotten employees appeared on the walls, their eyes hollow and their expressions frozen in eternal anguish. Whispers filled the air, voices of the past echoing through the present. "Why are you here?" one of the voices cried out, a haunting melody of pain and frustration. I felt a surge of fear, the oppressive energy pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. "Please, I don't mean any harm. I just want to understand." Mr. Harris finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine once more. "Understanding can be dangerous, Lisa. Some things are better left buried." But it was too late. The basement had become a conduit between the living and the dead, a place where the past refused to stay hidden. I could feel the spirits pressing in on me, their collective sorrow and anger seeking release, their unfinished business binding them to this forsaken place. Determined to find a way to help, I reached out to Rebecca Collins, a friend and fellow nurse with a keen interest in the paranormal. Together, we devised a plan to communicate with the trapped spirits and offer them a chance to move on. Armed with candles, a Ouija board, and an unwavering resolve, we returned to the basement one stormy night, the building's corridors alive with the sounds of thunder and rain. As we entered room 302, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Rebecca set up the candles around the table, their flickering flames casting long shadows on the walls. I placed my hands on the Ouija board, my heart racing as we began the seance. "Spirits of room 302, Rebecca intoned, her voice steady. "We're here to help you find peace. Please, communicate with us." The board began to move, the planchette sliding smoothly across the surface as if guided by an unseen force. I felt a chill run down my spine as the first letters appeared. WHY. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice trembling. The planchette moved swiftly, spelling out, "Bound." "Bound to this place," Rebecca said, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of the spirits. "What do you need to be free?" The board responded again, "Memories." I understood. The spirits were trapped by their unresolved memories, unable to let go of the past. "How can we help you remember and move on?" The planchette moved deliberately, spelling out, "Recognition." "We need you to recognize the sacrifices you made and honor your memories," I explained, feeling a surge of empathy for the restless souls surrounding us. As we continued the seance, the spirits began to manifest more clearly, their forms becoming more defined as they listened to our promises of recognition and remembrance. The oppressive energy in the room began to lift, replaced by a sense of calm and gratitude. Rebecca and I spent the next few hours documenting the stories of the trapped spirits, listening to their tales of love, loss, and the relentless pursuit of purpose. We gathered old photographs, personal mementos, and any artifacts that could help us honor their memories and facilitate their passage to the afterlife. One by one, the spirits began to fade, their expressions serene as they finally found the closure they had been denied for so long. Mr. Harris watched silently, his eyes reflecting a mix of sorrow and satisfaction. "We did it," Rebecca whispered, her voice filled with awe. "They're free." As the last spirit disappeared, the room was filled with a profound silence, the weight of years of anguish lifted from its walls. We stood there, breathing heavily, the storm outside now a distant rumble. "Thank you," Mr. Harris said softly, his voice carrying a sense of finality. "You've given them what they needed." We left room 302 with a newfound respect for the hidden stories that lay beneath the surface of our everyday lives. The basement no longer felt like a place of fear, but rather a sanctuary of memories, a testament to the enduring spirit of those who had been forgotten. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in the office shifted. The eerie sightings and unexplained occurrences ceased, replaced by a sense of peace that permeated the building. Mr. Harris continued his nightly routines, but there was a noticeable lightness in his demeanor, as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. I often found myself reflecting on that stormy night, the power of empathy, and the importance of remembering those who had been lost. The locked meeting room had transformed from a place of fear into a symbol of healing and closure, a reminder that even in the most unexpected places, stories of the past can linger, waiting to be heard and honored. And so, life at Helix Technologies continued, the haunted basement now a quiet testament to the enduring power of compassion and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all, living and departed alike. The eternal nurse, the forgotten spirits, and the basement janitor were no longer mere whispers of ghost stories, but integral parts of our shared history, guiding us to cherish the memories that shape our lives and the unseen forces that watch over us in the shadows. Story number 5. The Shadow Behind the Printer. Austin, Texas. I've always been a night owl, especially since I started working at TechWave Solutions, a small but bustling tech company nestled in the heart of Austin. The office, with its open floor plan and modern amenities, was a haven for innovation during the day. But as the sun set and the city's vibrant nightlife took over, the office transformed into a silent, almost eerie workspace. It was during these late-night shifts that I felt the weight of solitude most keenly. My name is Mike Anderson, and I'm a software developer by trade. Working late wasn't uncommon for me, the deadlines were tight, and the projects demanding. The office would gradually empty, leaving me alone with the hum of computers and the soft glow of fluorescent lights. It was during these moments of isolation that I first noticed something unsettling about the office printer. Every night, without fail, I'd head to the printing station to collect my documents. It was a standard, slightly outdated printer situated near the back of the office. The area around it was dimly lit, the only light coming from a single overhead bulb that cast long shadows across the room. As I approached the printer, a strange sensation would wash over me, a feeling of being watched, as if eyes were fixed on me from the darkness. At first, I chalked it up to the stress of work and the isolation of the late hours. But as the weeks turned into months, the feeling intensified. I began to hear faint whispers, indistinct murmurs that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the office. Every time I turned around, there was nothing there, just the empty, silent corridors stretching out behind me. One particularly cold December night, I was burning the midnight oil, working on a critical update for a client. The office was quieter than usual, the usual hum of activity replaced by an oppressive stillness. As I finished printing a stack of documents, I felt the familiar chill run down my spine. The sensation was stronger than ever before, a paralyzing fear that made my skin crawl. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there, but the corridor was empty. Shaking off the unease, I grabbed my papers and turned to leave. But just as I did, a sudden noise stopped me in my tracks, a loud thud coming from the direction of the printer. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned back, the room now feeling colder and more oppressive than before. Standing there, in the dim light, was the figure of a man. His appearance was ghostly, his features blurred and indistinct, as if he were made of shadows and mist. He stood silently behind the printer, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. "Why are you here?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't respond. Instead, he began to move towards me, each step deliberate and slow. I backed away, my mind racing with fear and confusion. "Who are you? What do you want?" His presence was overwhelming, an invisible force pressing down on me, making it difficult to breathe. As he drew closer, the air around us grew colder, the shadows deepening as if the darkness itself was closing in. I could feel his gaze piercing through me, searching for something I couldn't understand. Summoning every ounce of courage, I turned and sprinted towards the exit, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the empty office. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, chasing me down the hallways as I desperately tried to escape. My heart raced, the fear palpable as I pushed open the door and burst into the night air, gasping for breath. I didn't stop running until I was safely inside my car, the engine roaring to life as I sped away from the haunted office. The streets of Austin were quiet, the city's nightlife just beginning to stir, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. The shadowy figure lingered in the back of my mind, a haunting presence that refused to let me go. The next morning, shaken and sleep-deprived, I decided to confide in my colleague, Jenna. She was the only person I felt comfortable talking to about the strange occurrences at work. Over coffee in the break room, I recounted the night's terrifying events, hoping for some rational explanation. Jenna listened intently, her eyes widening with concern. "Mike, that's not the first time someone's mentioned feeling like they're being watched around here. But no one ever talks about seeing anyone." I frowned, the pieces of the puzzle still elusive. "There's more. I actually saw something, in the basement. It was like a ghost or something. I'm not sure what to make of it." Jenna hesitated, her expression cautious. "The basement has always been off limits to employees. It's just storage and old equipment. Maybe you're just stressed from the long hours." But I could see the unease in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement that something was amiss. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I decided to do some research. I dug through old company records and spoke with longtime employees, trying to uncover any information about past incidents or disappearances. What I found was chilling. A decade ago, TechWave Solutions had been the site of a tragic accident. A senior developer named Brian Thompson had died in the basement during a late-night project. The details were murky, reports varied between an electrical fire and a heart attack, but the truth was buried in layers of company bureaucracy. Since then, room 302 in the basement had been sealed off, deemed unsafe after the incident. Officially, no one worked there anymore, but whispers of strange noises and apparitions persisted among the staff. Armed with this knowledge, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Brian Thompson had been a dedicated worker, beloved by his colleagues, but his untimely death had left a void that the company struggled to fill. Perhaps his restless spirit was still trapped in the basement, unable to find peace after his sudden demise. One evening, determined to confront the lingering presence, I decided to visit the basement after hours. Armed with a flashlight and my phone for recording, I made my way to the sealed door of room 302. The corridor was dark, the only light coming from the flickering overhead bulb that cast long shadows on the walls. My heart raced as I reached the door, the weight of the years of silence pressing down on me. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door, the hinges groaning in protest. The room was empty, save for the remnants of old projects and scattered papers. The air was thick with dust and the scent of stale coffee, a testament to the long hours that had been spent here. I scanned the room, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, searching for any sign of Brian or the apparition that haunted the office. As I moved closer to the old conference table, I felt a chill run down my spine. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, my breath visible in the cold air. I heard the faint sound of typing, the rhythmic click of keys echoing through the empty space. My heart pounded as I turned around, the beam of my flashlight catching a shadowy figure hunched over a computer. "Brian?" I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. The figure turned slowly, revealing the hollow void where his eyes should have been. His face was gaunt, the features twisted in eternal anguish. He stared at me, his presence overwhelming, a silent scream trapped behind his lifeless eyes. "Why are you here?" I demanded, taking a step forward, but feeling an invisible barrier hold me back. The room seemed to grow darker, the shadows deepening as the whispers began anew, faint, desperate pleas that filled the air with an unbearable sadness. "I can't leave," the voice echoed, a haunting blend of sorrow and frustration. "I'm still here, still working." I felt a surge of empathy, understanding that Brian's spirit was bound to the basement by his unfinished work and unresolved grief. "I'm sorry, Brian. I didn't know. How can I help you find peace?" The apparition seemed to flicker, his form wavering like a reflection on disturbed water. "Remember us. Honor our work. Don't let us be forgotten." Determined to fulfill his wish, I reached out, placing a hand on the cold surface of the table. "I'll make sure your story is told. Your dedication won't be forgotten." As I spoke, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. The oppressive weight of sorrow lifted slightly, replaced by a sense of calm and acceptance. The shadows receded, and the air warmed, the cold dissipating as if a burden had been lifted from the space. "Thank you," the voice whispered, the sound now filled with relief. "Finally, we can rest." With those final words, the apparition of Brian Thompson faded, his presence leaving behind a lingering sense of peace. The room felt lighter, the oppressive silence replaced by the gentle hum of the office machinery outside. I left room 302 that night with a heavy heart, but also with a sense of fulfillment. Brian Thompson's spirit had found the closure it needed, and the haunting presence that had plagued the office was finally gone. The next morning, I shared my experience with Jenna and a few other close colleagues, the story spreading through the office with a mix of skepticism and awe. Word of the haunted room 302 eventually made its way to the higher-ups, prompting a thorough investigation into the old conference room and the events leading up to Brian's death. The company honored his memory by dedicating a new meeting room in his name, ensuring that his contributions would never be forgotten. Life at TechWave Solutions returned to normal, the late-night shifts now free from the eerie presence that had once loomed over us. But the memory of that night lingered, a poignant reminder of the thin line between life and death, and the lingering spirits that wait for recognition and peace. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the office late at night, I catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure standing near the old conference table, his presence subtle but undeniable. But instead of fear, I feel a sense of respect and compassion, knowing that his story had finally been heard and honored. The shadow behind the printer had been laid to rest, but the lessons learned from that haunting experience stayed with me forever. It taught me the importance of acknowledging those who have passed, the power of empathy, and the enduring impact of remembrance. And as long as I continue to walk the quiet corridors of TechWave Solutions, I carry with me the memory of Brian Thompson, a testament to the souls that linger in the spaces we often overlook, waiting for someone to listen and help them find their way home.